September 7th, 1940. London. Sergeant Bill Fletcher stands beside his 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun in Hyde Park and watches 500 German bombers fill the evening sky. The air raid sirens have been wailing for 3 minutes. His crew is ready. His ammunition is stacked. His gun is loaded. But nothing, not training, not drills, not imagination, prepared him for this moment when the entire Luftwaffe seems to be heading straight for his city. Most gun crews would fire until ordered to cease. Fletcher's crew will fire until they physically cannot. What happens in the next 12 hours will prove that sometimes victory isn't about stopping the enemy. It's about refusing to let them think they've won. The day had started normally, as normal as any day could be in a Britain standing alone against Nazi Germany. Fletcher had woken at 0600 in the small row house in Bethnal Green he shared with his wife Mary and their 2 children, Sarah, 8, and Thomas, 5. The morning routine was familiar. Breakfast, kids prepared for school. Mary worried, as she did every morning, about the war that felt both distant and terrifyingly close. "They say the invasion's coming," Mary had said, pouring tea with hands that shook slightly. "Jerry's gathering barges across the channel." Fletcher had taken her hand, steady, calm. "They've been saying that for months. The Navy will sink them before they get halfway across, and if they don't, we'll be waiting." "And if they come from the sky?" Fletcher had looked out the window, at the barrage balloons floating above London like strange silver elephants, at the sandbags piled around doorways, at the city preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. "Then, we shoot them down. That's what the guns are for," he'd reported to his battery position at 0800. Hyde Park, one of London's great green spaces, now bristled with anti-aircraft guns. His crew, 4 men he'd trained with for 8 months, was already there, checking the gun, checking hit. Running through procedures. Ready. The 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun was a beast, 4 tons of steel, firing 28-pound shells at aircraft up to 32 Bs feet. Rate of fire, 10 rounds per minute when the crew was good. Fletcher's crew was very good. Corporal Jimmy Walsh, the gunner, 24 from Liverpool, could track aircraft with instinctive precision. Private Tommy Bennett, the loader, 19, baby-faced, could load shells faster than anyone Fletcher had seen. Private David Miller, the spotter, 26, married, wife pregnant, had eyes like a hawk. Private Eddie Harris, ammunition handler, 20, was strong as an ox and twice as reliable. 5 men, 1 gun. Their job, defend London from the Luftwaffe. For months they'd waited. The Battle of Britain raged overhead, fighters dueling fighters, but the big raids hadn't come. Not to London, not yet. Hitler was focusing on airfields, on ports, on military targets, but intelligence suggested that was changing. The word coming down from command was clear. Prepare for major raids on the city. The Blitz was coming. Fletcher had spent the afternoon drilling his crew. Load, aim, fire, reload, again, until the movements were automatic, until they could do it in their sleep, in smoke, in chaos. At 1700 hours, they'd broken for dinner, bully beef and bread, tea that was more water than tea. They ate in the lengthening shadows of early September, talked about football, about girls, about anything except what they were all thinking. When would it start? At 1700 hours and 43 minutes, the air raid sirens began. The sound was distinctive, rising and falling, wailing like the world ending. Fletcher had heard it before during drills, but this wasn't a drill. "All crew, to stations! This is not a drill! Move!" The men scrambled. Training took over. Walsh to the gun seat, Bennett to the loading position, Miller to the spotting scope, Harris to the ammunition ready racks. Fletcher took his position as gun commander. Beside the predictor, the mechanical computer that calculated where to aim based on aircraft speed, altitude, and direction. Primitive by later standards, miraculous by 1940 standards. He scanned the sky. Clear, twilight, beautiful. Then he heard them. The sound came before the sight, a deep thrumming, hundreds of engines, growing louder. Then he saw them. Aircraft, dozens, no, hundreds, wave after wave, flying in formation, bombers, German bombers, Heinkels and Dorniers, more than Fletcher had ever seen in one place. "Jesus Christ," Walsh whispered. "Track them," Fletcher ordered, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. "Miller, give me altitude and bearing." Miller's eye pressed to the spotting scope. Multiple formations, altitude 15,000 feet, bearing, he paused, recalculated, bearing directly toward central London. 500 bombers, maybe more, all headed for his city, for his home, for Mary and Sarah and Thomas somewhere down there. Fletcher pushed the thought away. Focus, do your job. Load high explosive. Bennett slammed a shell into the breech. Loaded. Target-led formation, adjust for wind and altitude. Fletcher worked the predictor, calculated intercept point. The gun traversed, elevated. Fire! The gun roared. The recoil shook the ground. The shell screamed skyward. Across Hyde Park, across London, hundreds of other guns fired. The night erupted with flame and thunder. Fletcher watched through binoculars. His shell burst near the lead formation, black smoke blooming in twilight. Too far. The German formation didn't even flinch. Adjust left 2 degrees, reload. Bennett loaded. Walsh adjusted. The gun fired again. Again. The rhythm established. Load, aim, fire. 10 rounds per minute, every minute, without stopping. The German bombers reached central London. The first bombs fell. Fletcher couldn't see the impacts from Hyde Park, but he saw the flashes, heard the distant crump of explosions, saw smoke beginning to rise. His city was burning. "Keep firing," he ordered, voice flat, controlled. "Don't stop." The gun barked, again. The barrel heated, the crew sweated. Shells rained skyward into the massive German aircraft. Some bombers fell, not many. Maybe 1 in 50. The flak wasn't stopping them, wasn't even slowing them, but it was there, visible, defiant, telling the Germans that London would fight. At 1800 hours, the first wave passed. The bombers turned east, heading home. The crew paused, breathing hard, ears ringing despite the cotton wadding. "That it?" Harris asked, hope in his voice. Fletcher checked the sky, listened, more engines, another wave coming. "No, that's not it. Reload. Prepare to engage." The second wave came at 1830, bigger than the first. The gun crew fired and fired and fired. The third wave came at 1900, the fourth at 1930. By 2000 hours, central London was an inferno. Flames visible from Hyde Park, smoke blotting out stars. The docks were burning. The East End was burning. Bethnal Green, where Fletcher's family lived, was somewhere in that smoke. He forced himself not to think about it. Focus. Do your job. Protect the city. Your family is part of the city. Protect them by stopping the bombers. But they weren't stopping the bombers. They were annoying them, forcing them higher, making them less accurate, killing a few, but not stopping them. At 2100 hours, Eddie Harris went down. A German bomber, hit by flak from another gun, broke formation, losing altitude. The pilot jettisoned his bomb load early. One bomb fell toward Hyde Park. Fletcher saw it, shouted warning. "Take cover." The crew dove. The bomb hit 200 yards away. The explosion was monstrous. Shrapnel screamed through the air. When Fletcher looked up, Harris was on the ground, blood spreading across his chest. "Medic!" Fletcher shouted, but the medics were overwhelmed. Casualties across the park from near misses and shrapnel. Miller left his spotting position, crawled to Harris, applied pressure to the wound. "It's bad, Sarge, real bad." Harris coughed blood. "Is the gun okay?" Fletcher felt something break inside his chest. 20 years old, bleeding out, asking about the gun. "Gun's fine, Eddie, you just rest." "No." Harris gripped Fletcher's jacket. "Keep shooting. Don't stop. Promise me." "I promise." Harris smiled weakly, coughed again, went still. Fletcher closed Eddie's eyes, stood. His voice was iron. "Back to stations. We keep firing." "Sarge," Bennett started. "I said back to stations, now." They returned to the gun. 4 men now. Miller split time between spotting and ammunition handling. The rhythm slowed, 8 rounds per minute instead of 10. But they kept firing. At 2200 hours, another wave. At 2300, another. The bombing didn't stop. The Luftwaffe came in relays, fresh bombers replacing those that returned to France to rearm. By midnight, Fletcher's ammunition was running low. He checked the stocks, maybe 200 rounds left. At current rate of fire, that was 25 minutes. Then what? Stop shooting? Let the Germans think London had given up? No. They'd fire until the last shell, then they'd throw rocks if they had to. "Conserve ammunition," he ordered. 6 rounds per minute. Pick your targets. Walsh nodded, adjusted his fire. More careful now. more precise. At 0100 hours, September 8th, the ammunition was down to 50 rounds. At 0200, 20 rounds. At 0230, the last shell was loaded. Fletcher watched it fire. Watched the shell arc into the smoke-filled ski, watched it detonate near a German bomber that flew on, seemingly undamaged. The gun fell silent. Across London, other guns were still firing. But Fletcher's gun, his responsibility, his crew, was done. Bennett looked at him. "What now, Sarge?" Fletcher looked at the burning city, at the smoke, at the flames reaching toward heaven, at the German bombers still overhead, still dropping bombs, still killing his people. He thought about Eddie Harris asking if the gun was okay, about Mary and Sarah and Thomas somewhere in that inferno, about the promise he'd made that London would fight. "Now we reload," he said quietly. "Sarge, there's no ammunition." "Then we find some." "Miller, Harris's body needs to be moved to the aid station. You and Bennett handle that. Walsh, you're with me. We're going to scavenge ammunition from damaged guns." "That's against regulations." "Fuck regulations. Our city is burning. We have a working gun and no ammunition. There are destroyed gun positions out there with ammunition they don't need anymore. We're taking it." Walsh grinned, fierce, angry. "Yes, Sergeant." They went into hell to find ammunition. Hyde Park at night, under bombardment, was a vision of hell. Fletcher and Walsh moved through smoke and darkness toward the nearest damaged gun position, 200 yards east. The gun had taken a direct hit an hour earlier. The crew was dead or evacuated, but the ammunition might still be intact. The sky above them pulsed with light, German bombers silhouetted against fires, searchlights sweeping, flak bursts creating brief constellations. The sound was constant, engines, explosions, the whistle of falling bombs, the crump of impacts. London was dying, block by block, building by building. Fletcher tried not to think about Bethnal Green, about Mary, about the kids. They'd gone to the shelter. They had to have gone to the shelter. Mary was smart, careful. She'd have taken them underground the moment the siren sounded. But what if the shelter took a direct hit? What if... "Sarge, watch it!" Walsh pulled him down. A bomb fell 100 yards away. The explosion threw dirt and debris. Shrapnel sang overhead. They waited, then moved again. The damaged gun position was carnage. The 3.7-inch gun lay on its side, barrel twisted. The blast had killed 3 crew members instantly. A 4th sat against sandbags, badly wounded, eyes unseeing. Fletcher checked him. Dead. Gone while they'd been approaching. "God rest," Fletcher murmured, then moved to the ammunition lockers. Some were destroyed. Shells detonated by the blast, but others, protected by sandbags, were intact. 23 shells, Walsh counted. Maybe 30 if we check the auxiliary storage. They found 37 shells total, not much. Maybe 5 minutes of firing, but 5 minutes was better than silence. "We carry what we can, 2 trips." They loaded shells into their arms, heavy, awkward, started back toward their gun. Halfway there, another bombing run passed overhead, bombs falling like rain. One hit near the Serpentine. Water geysered upward, turned to steam by the explosion's heat. Fletcher and Walsh dove into a crater, covered their heads, waited for the world to stop trying to kill them. When silence returned, relative silence, the city still burned, they climbed out and continued. Bennett and Miller had returned from moving Eddie's body. They saw Fletcher and Walsh approaching with shells and didn't ask questions, just helped unload. "There's more," Fletcher said. "Miller, you're with me. Walsh, Bennett, prep the gun. When we get back, we start firing immediately." Fletcher and Miller made the second trip, found another gun position that had been abandoned when the crew was ordered to evacuate wounded, grabbed every shell they could carry. By 0300 hours, they had 63 shells, maybe 7 minutes of firing at reduced rate. "Load," Fletcher ordered. Bennett loaded. Walsh aimed. The gun roared back to life. 1 gun, 4 men, 63 shells, against 500 bombers and the entire Luftwaffe. Hopeless, pointless, but they fired anyway, because silence was surrender, and surrender wasn't in Fletcher's vocabulary. At 0330, a runner arrived from Battery Command, young lieutenant, couldn't have been 25, face blackened by smoke. "Sergeant Fletcher, I'm ordered to assess gun status. Gun operational, ammunition, scavenged from damaged positions, currently engaging." The lieutenant blinked. "Scavenged? That's not authorized procedure." Neither is letting Jerry bomb us unopposed. Fletcher kept his eyes on the sky. Sir. The lieutenant looked at the gun, at the crew, at the burning city, made a decision. I didn't see anything, Sergeant. Carry on. Yes, sir. The lieutenant left. Fletcher allowed himself a grim smile. Some officers understood. At Duro 400, the character of the raid changed. The heavy bombers had mostly passed. Now came the incendiaries, smaller aircraft dropping firebombs, designed to spread flames, to create firestorms. Fletcher watched new fires ignite across London. The city wasn't just burning now. It was becoming fire. His hands tightened on the predictor controls. Mary, Sarah, Thomas, somewhere in that inferno. Sarge? Walsh's voice. Quiet, concerned. You okay? Fletcher realized his hands were shaking. He forced them steady. Fine. Track that formation at 2 o'clock. Walsh didn't argue. Tracked the aircraft. Fired. At 0430, they were down to 20 shells. At 0500, 10 shells. At 0515, Bennett collapsed. Not wounded, just exhausted. The kid had been loading shells for 10 hours straight, physical labor that would break most men. He'd pushed beyond human limits, and his body finally said no. Miller left his spotting position, helped Bennett to the ground, took his place as loader. 3 men now, Fletcher, Walsh, Miller, against the burning sky. At 0530, the last shell was loaded. Fletcher watched it fire, watched it detonate near an incendiary bomber, saw the aircraft shudder but continue. The gun fell silent again. Dawn was coming, gray light beginning to show in the east. The fires made it hard to see, but it was there. A new day, if you could call it that. The bombers were thinning out. The main raid was ending. Stragglers still overhead, but the massive formations were gone. Fletcher looked at his crew. Walsh slumped in the gun seat, face streaked with sweat and smoke. Miller sitting beside unconscious Bennett, looking hollowed out. They'd fired for nearly 11 hours. Hundreds of rounds, maybe killed a few bombers, maybe saved a few lives by forcing others to fly higher, drop less accurately, or maybe they'd accomplished nothing except make noise in the dark. We did good, Fletcher said, his voice hoarse from shouting over the gun. We did everything we could. Walsh nodded, didn't speak, too tired. Miller looked at the burning city. How many you think died tonight? Fletcher had no answer. Hundreds? Thousands? How do you count the dead when entire neighborhoods are ash? The all-clear sounded at 0545. The bombers were gone. The raid was over. Survivors emerged from shelters, looked at their city. Some neighborhoods were untouched. Others were moonscape. Entire blocks simply gone. Fletcher stood. Miller, stay with Bennett. Walsh, you're with me. We need to file after-action report and request ammunition, resupply. But he didn't move immediately. He stood looking toward Bethnal Green, toward where his home should be, where his family was, if they were alive. Sarge, Walsh said quietly, want me to go with you? To check? Fletcher wanted to say yes, wanted to run to Bethnal Green right now, find his family. No, but he was a soldier, a sergeant. He had responsibilities. No, after-action report first, then we check on our families. They walked to Battery Command. The park looked like a battlefield. Craters, damaged equipment, bodies covered with blankets, medics still working on the wounded. The battery commander was Major Hobbs, 50 years old, World War I veteran. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Fletcher, report. Gun 2 operational, sir. Fired continuously from 1743 until ammunition exhausted at 0515. Approximately 450 rounds expended. 1 KIA, Private Harris. 1 collapsed from exhaustion, Private Bennett. Gun sustained minor damage but remains serviceable. Hobbs studied him. 450 rounds? Our allocation was 300. Scavenged from damaged positions, sir. Initiative. Good. Hobbs made a note. Gun 2 is stood down for 24 hours. Get your men rest. Get yourself rest. We'll rearm and reconstitute tomorrow. Sir, permission to check on my family. Hobbs nodded. Granted, all married personnel have permission, but Fletcher, prepare yourself. The East End took heavy casualties. Fletcher's stomach dropped. How heavy? We don't know yet. Communications are spotty, but bad, very bad. Fletcher saluted, left. Walsh followed. They requisitioned a lorry and driver, drove through London toward Bethnal Green. The route took them through devastation. Buildings collapsed, streets blocked by rubble, fires still burning, rescue crews digging through debris. The smell was indescribable. Smoke, cordite, gas, death. Bethnal Green had been hit hard. Not as bad as the docks. Those were obliterated, but hard enough. Fletcher's street was partially standing. Some houses destroyed, others damaged. His house, still there, damaged, windows blown out, roof partially collapsed, but standing. Fletcher ran, burst through the front door. "Mary! Sarah! Thomas!" Silence. Empty. His heart stopped. They were gone. Dead. Buried somewhere. Gone. Then he heard footsteps above. On the stairs, Mary appeared. Dirty, exhausted, but alive, carrying Thomas, Sarah behind her. "Bill?" Fletcher crossed the room in 2 strides, pulled them into his arms. Mary was crying. The kids were crying. He might have been crying. Didn't care. "You're alive! You're alive!" "We were in the shelter, under the green. It held. We're okay. We're okay." Fletcher held them, felt the reality of them. Solid, real, alive. His family had survived. Not everyone had. He knew that. The street was filled with families searching, calling names, finding bodies or finding nothing. But his family had survived. He'd protected them. Not directly. Not personally. But by standing at that gun, by firing into the darkness, by refusing to let the Germans think London had quit. Every shell he'd fired was for them. Every minute at that gun was for them. "I have to go back," he said quietly. "The gun needs to be ready. They'll come again tonight." Mary pulled back, looked at him. "Tonight?" "Yes. This wasn't a one-time raid. This is the Blitz. It's just beginning." Her face showed fear, but also determination. "Then you go. You man that gun. You protect this city. We'll be in the shelter. We'll survive." Fletcher kissed her, kissed the kids, left before he changed his mind. Walsh was waiting by the lorry. "Your family? Safe? Yours?" "Don't know yet. Driver's taking me next." They drove in silence, each man alone with his thoughts, his fears, his relief or his dread. Back at Hyde Park, Bennett had regained consciousness. Medics had checked him. Dehydration and exhaustion, but otherwise okay. Miller's wife had sent word. She was safe. Baby still unborn. Still okay. The crew was intact. Reduced but intact. At 1400 hours, fresh ammunition arrived. 300 rounds. They restocked. At 1600 hours, Major Hobbs called Fletcher to command post. "Sergeant, intelligence indicates another raid tonight, possibly bigger than last night." Fletcher felt the weight of it. Last night again, and tomorrow night, and the night after, for weeks, months, however long it took. "Yes, sir. We'll be ready. I'm putting you in for commendation. You and your crew. What you did last night, continuing to fight after ammunition exhausted, scavenging rounds, that's the kind of determination that wins wars." Fletcher shook his head. "We just did our job, sir." "No, you did more than your job. You refused to quit. That matters. That means something." At 1900 hours, the sirens sounded again. The bombers came. Again. Hundreds of them. Fletcher's crew manned their gun. Again, loaded, aimed, fired. The rhythm established. The pattern set. This was their war now. Not fought in trenches or on battlefields, but in a park, behind a gun, firing into darkness, defending a city that refused to die. The second night was worse than the first. Not in scale, the Germans sent fewer bombers, but in psychology. The first night had been shock, chaos, adrenaline carrying you through. The second night was knowing exactly what was coming, waiting for it, dreading it. Fletcher's crew stood at their gun as dusk fell. Fresh ammunition stocked, guns serviced, ready, but the men looked different, hollowed out, eyes that had seen too much. Bennett's hands shook slightly when he loaded practice rounds. Walsh's usually steady aim wavered. Miller kept glancing toward the city where his pregnant wife waited. Fletcher understood. They'd survived one night. Now they had to survive another, and another after that. How long could you sustain this? How many nights before something broke? "Listen to me," Fletcher said quietly. "Last night we fired 450 rounds. Shot down at least 3 bombers, damaged a dozen others. Every shell we put up there forces them higher, makes them less accurate, saves lives." "Did it save Eddie?" Bennett asked, voice flat. Fletcher met his eyes. "No, It didn't. Eddie died doing his job, protecting this city. We honor him by continuing that job. The sirens wailed at 1930 hours. The bombers came at 2000. The gun roared to life. Fletcher's crew fell into the rhythm. Load, aim, fire, again, again. The world compressed to that simple cycle. But tonight felt different. The Germans had adjusted tactics, flying higher, spreading formations, making themselves harder targets. Fletcher adjusted his firing solutions, calculated new intercepts. The shells climbed higher, took longer to reach altitude, hit less frequently. At 2200 hours, a German bomber broke through the flak, flew low, desperate or damaged, headed straight toward Hyde Park. "Track him," Fletcher shouted. Walsh swung the gun. The bomber was too close, too fast. The gun couldn't depress far enough. The bomber's bomb bay opened, black shapes tumbling. "Take cover!" The crew dove. Fletcher wrapped himself around the predictor, protecting the instrument. The bombs hit across the park. One landed 30 yards away. The blast picked Fletcher up and threw him like a doll. He hit the ground hard, couldn't breathe, ears ringing. He forced himself up, checked his crew. Walsh was down, blood running from his scalp. Miller was on his knees, stunned. Bennett was screaming. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, broken, badly. Fletcher crawled to him. "I've got you, you're okay." "My arm, Sarge, my arm!" Medics arrived, carried Bennett away. His screams faded into the night. Fletcher turned to Walsh. The corporal was sitting up, head bandaged. "I'm okay, Sarge. Looks worse than it is. Can you fire?" "Yes." "Then we keep shooting." 2 men now, Fletcher and Walsh. Miller could spot and load, but couldn't do both. They were operating at half efficiency, but they kept firing. At midnight, ammunition was running low again. Fletcher sent Miller to scavenge. The private returned with 40 rounds. At Aero 200, those 40 were gone. This time, Fletcher didn't send anyone scrounging. The raid was winding down. The Germans were leaving. London had survived another night. The all-clear sounded at 0445. Fletcher's crew collapsed. 2 men, 1 gun. They'd fired 320 rounds over 7 hours. Not as many as the first night, but enough. Enough to tell the Germans that London wouldn't quit. The pattern established. Night after night, the Luftwaffe came. Fletcher's crew fired, sometimes with full crew, sometimes reduced by wounds or exhaustion, but always firing. September became October. October became November. 57 consecutive nights of bombing. Bennett returned after his arm healed. Couldn't load as fast, but could function. Walsh's head wound left him with headaches, but he stayed at his gun. Miller became a father, a son, born in a shelter during a raid, named William after Fletcher. New men joined to replace Eddie Harris. Private James Cooper, good kid, learned fast, died in his 3rd night when shrapnel found him. Private Robert Shaw replaced Cooper, survived 2 weeks, killed when a bomber crashed into the park, taking out 3 gun positions. The replacements kept coming. Fletcher kept training them. Some survived, some didn't. The mathematics were brutal and simple. By December, the Blitz had killed over 13,000 Londoners, wounded 20,000 more, destroyed 1 million buildings. But London hadn't surrendered, hadn't quit. The government still functioned, the ports still operated, the factories still produced, the people endured. Fletcher's gun had fired over 8,000 rounds, confirmed kills, 17 bombers, probable kills, 32, damaged, countless. The numbers didn't capture it, couldn't capture the reality of standing at a gun night after night, while your city burned, while people you'd known your whole life died in the rubble, while your family huddled in shelters wondering if you'd come home. The Blitz officially ended in May 1941. The Germans shifted their attention to Russia. The raids continued, but at reduced intensity. Fletcher's gun crew had survived. Walsh, Miller, Bennett, and Fletcher himself. Against impossible odds, they'd made it. Fletcher was promoted to warrant officer, awarded the Military Medal for sustained gallantry. His crew received commendations. At the ceremony, a general pinned the medal to Fletcher's chest. "You and your men exemplify British determination. You refused to quit. That's what won this battle." Fletcher thought about Eddie Harris asking if the gun was okay, about Cooper and Shaw and the other replacements whose names he'd never forget, about the nights when ammunition ran out and they'd scrounge shells from the dead. "We just did our job, sir." "No, warrant officer, you did more than that. You showed the Germans that London wouldn't break. That matters. That wins wars." The war continued. Fletcher served through D-Day, through the advance into Germany, through victory in 1945. He came home to London, to Mary, to Sarah and Thomas, older now, marked by the war but alive. They rebuilt their damaged house, rebuilt their lives. Fletcher returned to factory work. The AAA gun was gone, melted down for scrap. The park returned to being a park, the craters filled, the scars hidden, but Fletcher remembered. Every September 7th, he returned to Hyde Park, stood where his gun had been, looked at the ski. Other veterans joined him over the years. Gunners, fire wardens, home guard, people who'd fought the Blitz from the ground while the city burned around them. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. They remembered the same things, the sound of bombers, the smell of smoke, the exhaustion that went beyond physical, the determination that kept you standing when logic said, fall. In 1960, 20 years after the Blitz, the BBC interviewed Fletcher for a documentary. "What kept you fighting?" the interviewer asked, night after night, when it seemed hopeless. Fletcher thought about the question, about Mary and the kids, about Eddie Harris, about the city that refused to die. "It never seemed hopeless," he said finally. "Difficult, yes. Terrible, yes, but not hopeless, because every shell we fired told the Germans we were still here, still fighting. That's not hopeless, that's defiance." "And when you ran out of ammunition?" "We found more, or we waited for resupply, or we stood by the gun ready to load the moment shells arrived. Silence wasn't an option, surrender wasn't an option. We had one job, defend London, we did it." "Even when men died?" Fletcher's face hardened. "Especially when men died. They died defending this city. The only way to honor that was to continue, to keep the gun firing, to refuse to quit." The interviewer paused. "Some historians say the anti-aircraft guns weren't very effective, that they shot down relatively few bombers compared to the ammunition expended." "Effectiveness isn't just measured in kills," Fletcher replied. "We forced the Germans higher, made them less accurate, boosted civilian morale. People heard the guns and knew someone was fighting back. And we showed the Luftwaffe that London wouldn't be easy, that every raid would be contested. That matters in war." Fletcher retired in 1975, lived quietly, watched his children grow, welcomed grandchildren, carried the memories of those nights in ways only veterans understood. In 1985, 45 years after the Blitz, Fletcher attended a reunion of anti-aircraft gunners, 60 men, old now, gray, but present. Walsh was there, still steady, still reliable, working as a mechanic in Liverpool. Miller was there, 4 children, 7 grandchildren. The baby born during the Blitz was now a professor at Oxford. Bennett had passed away in 1980, heart attack, peaceful. They raised glasses to the absent, to Eddie Harris, to Cooper, to Shaw, to all the gunners who'd stood beside weapons that seemed inadequate against the might of the Luftwaffe, but had fired anyway. "We were just kids," Walsh said. "I was 24, thought I knew everything, knew nothing." "None of us did," Miller agreed. "But we learned, adapted, survived." "Because of Fletcher," Walsh said, looking at the old warrant officer. "You kept us together, kept us firing, kept us alive." Fletcher shook his head. "You kept yourselves alive. I just gave orders." "No, you gave us purpose. When ammunition ran out, you found more. When men fell, you kept going. You showed us what leadership looks like." Fletcher didn't respond. What could you say? That he'd been terrified every night? That he'd scrounged ammunition because the alternative was helplessness? That he'd kept firing because his family was down there in the flames? Leadership, he'd learned, wasn't about being fearless. It was about refusing to let fear stop you. About doing what needed doing, even when it seemed impossible. William Fletcher died in 1992 at age 84. Natural causes, surrounded by family. His funeral was attended by hundreds. Family, friends, fellow veterans, people whose parents or grandparents had survived the Blitz. Walsh spoke at the service, 81 years old, voice still strong. Bill Fletcher taught us something important, that determination matters, that refusing to quit matters. We couldn't stop the Luftwaffe, couldn't save everyone, couldn't prevent the destruction, but we could fight. We could stand at our guns and fire into the darkness and tell the enemy we were still here. He paused, collected himself. That's what Bill did for 57 nights, in Hyde Park, beside a gun that seemed too small for the task, with a crew that kept getting wounded or killed and replaced. He never quit, never stopped, never surrendered. And because he didn't, London didn't. The legacy of William Fletcher isn't in history books, isn't in grand monuments, it's in the city that survived, in the millions of Londoners who endured the Blitz and rebuilt afterward, in the understanding that sometimes victory isn't about overwhelming force, it's about stubborn refusal to surrender. Fletcher's gun fired 8,000 rounds, 17 confirmed kills, 32 probables, against 500 bombers per night. The mathematics suggested futility, but mathematics don't measure defiance, don't measure the psychological impact of flak bursting around bombers, don't measure what it meant to civilians hearing guns fire and knowing someone was fighting back. Fletcher understood that his job wasn't to win the battle. That would be won by fighters and factories and logistics. His job was simpler and more profound: stand at his gun and refuse to be silent. He did that job. For 57 nights, through death and exhaustion and despair, through ammunition shortages and crew losses and his own fear for his family. He stood. He fired. He refused to quit. That's the measure of a soldier. Not victories won or enemies killed, but determination sustained, purpose maintained, refusal to surrender even when surrender seems rational. London survived the Blitz because millions of people, soldiers and civilians, gunners and firefighters, wardens and medics, refused to quit. William Fletcher was one of them, standing in Hyde Park, beside a gun, firing into darkness, and in that darkness his defiance mattered.